Joining us now, White House Communications Director Kate Bedingfield from Cornwall, where that meeting with President Biden and Prime Minister Johnson is taking place today. What are the goals for the meeting, and will he be addressing the Good Friday agreements and other things, given that perhaps President Biden's description of Boris Johnson in years past may not be as flattering? What are the goals today moving forward?
Well, the goals today, Mika, are to, of course, reaffirm our special relationship with the UK, to talk about some of the shared challenges that we have in terms of tackling COVID, tackling climate crisis, bolstering our economic recovery. The Prime Minister and the President are going to look at an updated version. They're going to sign an updated version of the Atlantic Charter, a document that, of course, FDR and Churchill signed 80 years ago, reaffirming our alliance in the face, at the time, in the face of the Nazis. Now, of course, in the face of all sorts of different threats from around the globe. So the President and the Prime Minister, I'm not here to prejudge their conversation, but I think it will be a very productive one. And certainly, we're looking forward to making some important announcements today, including about the 500 million doses of vaccine that the United States is going to be donating to the global fight against COVID.
Hey, Kate, it's Willie Geist. Good to see you this morning. I know you've got a busy week ahead. I do want to jump ahead by a few days to the meeting with Vladimir Putin in Geneva. The first question a lot of people have is, will we see the two of them on stage together taking questions like we did in Helsinki? Vladimir Putin hasn't faced questions from Western media. Will there be a joint news conference?
Well, we're still working through some of the logistics on that, so we'll have more to share on that in the coming days. But, what I can say about the conversation is it's going to be candid. It's going to be direct. Obviously, President Biden is somebody who has been doing diplomacy on the world stage for all of his public career. He's somebody who's known President Putin for a long time. So this is going to be a direct conversation. He's going to raise a lot of the issues that, where we have real differences and real concerns. Of course, that includes human rights. That includes incursion on the Ukrainian border. That includes cyber attacks and the responsibility that Russia has when malign actors in their country are executing the kinds of attacks that we've seen of late. So these are all issues he's going to raise. But he's also going to talk about places of consensus. There are issues like nuclear proliferation, and we've signed an extension of the New START treaty. There are things where it is in our interest in the United States to work collaboratively with the Russians. So it'll be a direct conversation, and our aim here is to have a predictable, stable relationship.
So, Kate, how are you all viewing these 2 weeks? If you put together the Putin meeting and the issues you hope to bring up with him, with Boris Johnson and the G7 and the NATO summit, what is the thread through these? It was extraordinary. We were just talking about that the President of the United States felt he had to begin the trip yesterday in those remarks to American troops serving overseas by saying democracy effectively is on the edge, and it's on us to preserve it and to hold fast. So does the president view his role over this next week or so as reminding the world what America stands for?
He does. He does. I think, the key message that President Biden is delivering, you heard him deliver last night, and he'll continue to deliver throughout this trip, which is America is back. And, we are meeting with some of our closest and longest standing allies on this trip and it's important that in his first trip overseas that he's doing that, because what he's really showing is that democracies can lead. He views it as a responsibility of his to rebuild trust at home in the United States and the ability of our government to deliver. That's something that I think he's done in the first 5 months he's been in office with the rescue plan, the vaccination program. He's shown that government can deliver. But yes, on the world stage, what President Biden is going to be showing the world is that, America leads not just by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. And that's what you're going to see across the course of this week as we talk about the shared challenges that the biggest democracies in the world are facing, including the climate crisis and, of course, the pandemic and economic recovery. So that is the thread throughout this week of travel that the president's doing.
Kate, it's Casey Hunt. I want to ask you a little bit about how you're balancing what's going on overseas with what's happening here at home. The infrastructure package that you focused so much attention on is, of course, at a potentially critical juncture here. The president has been so personally involved in these conversations. He's now going to be overseas, obviously, for the next 8 or so days, especially considering you've put infrastructure occasionally in the category of national security, economic competitiveness, and all of those things. You and I both know it's harder than it sounds to stay involved in talks when you're half a world away. So how does the president plan to make sure his domestic priorities are going to stay on track at this point?
Yes. So he will remain engaged. And while he's away, he's also tasked members of his jobs cabinet, what he calls his jobs cabinet, and senior White House leadership to stay very engaged on the day-to-day on this, because we are at an important point. And, I think there's a lot of attempt to suggest that we're somehow sort of hitting a wall here, when in fact, we're at an important point because there's progress happening on multiple fronts. You have a bipartisan group in the Senate working on an infrastructure package. You have a bipartisan group in the House working on an infrastructure package. Obviously, Senator Sanders is going to introduce the budget resolution, which is part of how government functions and is also a vehicle where a lot of these priorities of President Biden's could move forward. So, to use maybe a slightly uncomfortable phrase, there are a lot of different ways to skin a cat. Mm-hmm. And there is progress moving forward on multiple fronts here. And this is a moment of great energy. And look, as you said, Casey, obviously a lot of what he's going to be discussing during this trip ties really closely to his domestic agenda. Just this week, the Senate voted to pass a bipartisan bill bolstering our competitiveness with China. So big pieces of his agenda are moving forward domestically, and he's going to be on the world stage reasserting America's leadership this week.
All right, Kate Bedingfield, White House Communications Director, thank you so much for being with us. We greatly appreciate it.